Good morning, everyone. Can you see everything looks in order? Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. I am an assistant professor at McGill, and I work with so many students that are involved in EGSS. So I'm just so thrilled and honored to be invited to speak with you this morning. And so when asked to do something on K through 12, I have a background in teaching math, so I'm glad that we balance out you being the English and math a little bit. But I was like, what exactly do I want to talk about? And so something that's really important to me, and I actually went back and looked at some of the work I did as a grad student. I decided to talk about creating a collaborative culture and a focus on social regulation of learning. So I work with a lot of teachers now. A lot of my students are teachers during the day, and then they're students at night, and then I have other students who are just really interested in learning. And so I wanted to kind of really look at this idea through a lens that focused both on research and practice, which you did as well. So I'm glad we're very much on the same page today. So collaborative learning. So let's talk about why we should do it. And so the growing diversity and structural complexity of today's classroom support the use of non-traditional classroom practices. Collaborative learning increases student engagement and helps students attain a wide range of skills. And students working in groups demonstrated intellectual benefits as well as social gains. And probably one of the most important parts of collaborative learning is that students can interact in diverse groups to solve problems that may be too complex to solve themselves. And by allowing these multiple perspectives, group work can also incorporate different backgrounds, opinions, and expertise. But students do not always see eye to eye when they bring in these different perspectives. So this, among other factors, can lead to dysfunction, resulting in low group functioning. So groups must be able to regulate, which by regulate, I mean plan, monitor, control, and evaluate their thinking, their motivation, their emotions, and behaviors to engage in productive collaboration. So now let's see what the literature says about group challenges. So these are the challenges that a lot of students go through in groups. And so this comes from the research on social regulation of learning, which is focused mainly on these three domains: cognition, motivation, and emotions. So the first is that students may struggle with cognitive aspects of the projects, like understanding the task or just understanding the content in general. Motivation might also be a challenge. They might experience issues related to interest, self-efficacy, and just differences in priorities. And then they might also struggle with socio-emotional aspects such as inclusion and providing support. But it's also difficult for teachers. So teachers often face many challenges when trying to design these collaborative learning activities. So the first, teachers often assume students know how to work collaboratively, when in fact, most students have not had successful past experiences with working in groups. So even for those with some exposure to collaborative learning, adequate preparation for group work is very rare. In most collaborative learning, the teacher kind of assumes this facilitator role and it shifts responsibility to the students. And this shift in the teacher and students' roles are often seen as the most challenging aspect of collaborative learning. And while student autonomy is seen as positive, students still need to be taught how to work in groups in order to remain focused under the absence of direct supervision. And so once they understood the new norms of the class and their role, there was still an issue working collectively. And so next, and I think this I've seen the most, is that many teachers try to implement collaborative learning into their existing classroom environments. And so I tried, and there's no judgment. I should have said that up front. There is no judgment, because I did this. I tried for years to integrate collaborative learning into my own classroom, but something was always missing. I tried the post hole structure. So every so often I would do a collaborative activity. I tried setting group roles where one person did this, another did this. But I always ended back with these traditional teacher-led practices. And so I'm like, what am I missing? And so once I went back to grad school and got into the research more, I realized that the big thing I was missing was a cultural shift. And so in order for collaborative learning to be implemented successfully, teachers must create a classroom culture that is conducive to successful collaborative environments to sustain this kind of learning. And students need explicit instruction on collaborative learning. So we teach students to do domain knowledge and skills. Why aren't we teaching them to learn collaboratively? So there's lots and lots of research on collaborative learning, but the theory that I really connect with and I think could be a really great theory that in practice that can be taught to students to help them navigate collaborative spaces is social regulation of learning. And so a more well-known theory and practice is self-regulated learning, which involves the planning, monitoring, control, and reflection of cognition or thinking, motivation and emotions, behaviors, and context. And so here are two well-known theories that most students will see in like a learning course or an ed psych course maybe. But similar to self-regulated learning, social regulation of learning involves the planning, monitoring, control, and reflection of cognition, motivation, emotions, and behaviors related to learning. But this regulation is specific to one which occurs during collaborative learning and includes three main types of regulation. So the first is self-regulated learning. So even in a group, students can regulate themselves. Next is co-regulated learning. This involves the transition of regulation from one person to members of the group or from multiple members of the group to others in the group. And last is socially shared regulation of learning, which involves where students kind of co-construct this level of group regulation. And research has shown that social regulation of learning is critical for sustained engagement and successful collaboration. So that's all good. That's up here, the theory up in the high super theory clouds. So what does that mean for learning and education? So what can educators do? How can teachers